Get ready to rumble. Schilling Show Unleashed on the Seven Thunders Media Network. Former city councilor, husband, father, and community watchdog. Your host, Rob Schilling.
Welcome to the Schilling Show Unleashed Podcast. Remember, your direct support makes our show possible, and you can directly support this podcast by visiting shillingshow.com and then clicking on the Patreon banner at the top of the page to make a monthly contribution. We appreciate your support. The Schilling Show Unleashed Podcast welcomes Lee Smith, a veteran journalist, New York Times bestselling author of the new book, Disappearing the President, Trump, Truth Social, and the Fight for the Republic. Lee, thanks for joining us today on the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's a real pleasure to get a chance to speak with you today.
I'd like to start out with Donald Trump and why the left sees him as such a threat.
Well, I think the most important thing is that Trump unashamedly and unabashedly cuts against the different cliches of the left, many of which unfortunately Republican leaders have bought into and even advanced in some cases, whether this has been about climate change or the Middle East or open borders. So Trump just says, no, that doesn't make sense. We're not going to do that. And that's why they're furious about it. It's not just the actual policy. It's that the actual policies, he rejects the premise of these policies. And so and by doing that, he rejects their worldview entirely. That's the primary thing that drives them crazy. I mean, there's a number of other things too, whether it has to do with China and how that's a source of income for this entire class, whether it has to do with alliances around the world. So there's a number of things, but again, the basic fundamental thing is that he undercuts their worldview, how they understand things. So they have to hate him.
So this is really interesting because for a while there, he was kind of a darling and in the media, and people on the left kind of liked him, hung out with him. So when did they first recognize this? When he stepped up to run for president, or was it before that?
No, he's been saying it all his life. The difference is that when you say it, when you're on TV or you're on a podcast. I mean, if you're a famous person like Donald Trump, it's funny and sounds offbeat. And wow, that Donald Trump, he's an edgy character. He's not just that for a TV celebrity. Boy, he's sure got some, different ideas, and that's really funny and cool. And I'm Oprah Winfrey, and let's talk to Donald Trump. When that person has the power as president of the United States to actually enact these policies, and that's what becomes scary. It's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this person who's against open borders and this person who thinks the United States is being, robbed up to half $1 trillion a year by the Chinese Communist Party is now president. What will we do? So that's what it was. It's like when he decided to actually run for president, and then when he became president, that's what terrified them. He has the power to act against their articles of faith.
Lee, there was something that happened following the 2020 election, which was pretty unprecedented. In other words, Trump was pretty much denied having a voice. And Twitter's a big one. He was banned, but in many other places, he was just left almost incapacitated as far as reaching back out to the public. Let's talk about that and how that was different than people in the past.
Right. Well, I write about that. I mean, that's the opening of my book, Disappearing the President. A lot of presidents, most presidents, aside from Barack Obama, but once they leave the Oval Office, they leave public life. They do things like Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton, and not all of these things are wholesome, but they generally put public life aside. What happened to Donald Trump was he was pretty clear after he lost that he was going to run again. He was already the presumptive candidate for 2024. He was silenced. They threw him off Twitter, threw him off Facebook. And you have to understand, it wasn't just that. It was, my book publisher at the time my book published at the time. My editor was fired from her job. All these people used it as an opportunity to purge their political enemies, and their political enemies were all on the right. So everything that had grown up around Trump, whether it was media was key, but you saw how Trump's lawyers were attacked as well. Most famous, and I also write about this in Disappearing the President. They went after Jeff Clark. They went after a whole bunch of different people. All these people who were indicted down in Georgia, the different people who were indicted. That was the Fulton County case. Yeah. Then there was also there were the different federal cases that were brought, which also involved a whole bunch of Trump allies. So it was really, and then of course January 6th itself, after Trump supporters. So it was an absolutely insane moment in American history. And right, they wanted to silence Trump, but they were also keen to silence his supporters. Give evidence how anyone who ever supported someone like this again would pay a price with their life. They would have their family. They'd lose their job. They'd lose money. They'd lose their savings. They might lose their family. They'd lose their freedom. That's what January 6th is all about. So all of this was unique in American history, and I'm hopeful that we don't turn to that moment. But I'm concerned, of course.
Yeah, I share your concern about that. And then there was a stroke of brilliance. Let's talk about Truth Social and the impact of Trump basically creating his own platform.
It was successful right away because people wanted to hear from Donald Trump, and Donald Trump wanted to be able to something else I write about. And the title Disappearing the President, Trump, Truth Social, on the fight for the Republic. So a lot of it has to do with Truth Social, how Truth Social started. This was an important thing. They've tried to get him back on Twitter in full force, but he likes Truth Social, and I like Truth Social too. I mean, Twitter is a very damaged instrument right now, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that it could be fixed, but it's in a very bad way right now. I think it's very disappointing. The management and curatorship of Twitter, I think it's extremely disappointing. Among other reasons, I'm very happy for Truth Social.
Let's talk about the lawfare, and you alluded to this earlier, but I mean, this was unprecedented, unheard of, and frankly, very frightening. Going after Trump, using the legal system, whether it's at various states, Georgia, New York, or the federal government. This is harrowing.
The Trump administration right now is having trouble accomplishing some of its important goals, which is including the deportation campaign. It's including the deportation of people who appear to be terrorists like Mohsen Madawi. I mean, this is a guy, a Columbia University graduate student, who was given a visa, never should have been given a visa by U.S. consular authorities in Israel, where he got his visa, never should have received his visa, came to Columbia University. I mean, there was evidence that he was involved in some very bad stuff in the Palestinian territories, and they can't deport him now. This is our justice system. So, I ask people, I said, so look, has our justice system been restored? Because there were a lot of Trump supporters who paid a very steep price from it is no longer a justice system. Right. And so you look at this, and we have to still be concerned. This is a continuation of the lawfare campaign, except it's not just as before. It's not just Donald Trump that's being targeted. It's the country. So what is the message? The message is that the Biden administration can open up our borders and let in 10 million people, and there's nothing that we can do about it. Doesn't matter that Americans didn't vote for it. Doesn't matter that it represents the depression of American wages. It represents a surge in crime rate. Doesn't matter. If that's what the Democrats want, they can do it, and they can get away with it because they have judges all over the country who will make sure that they can do whatever they want. It's a very, very volatile situation, and this is why I urge voters. Hopefully there are responsible Democrats out there too, but to recognize what's happening here, that the election of Donald Trump did not end our woes. We are right to be happy and right to be relieved, but all it does is give us some breathing space and some time to get things done. It hardly solves the problems that we have.
Something that's been exposed in all of this is the corruption of the judiciary. And what are we to do about that when we have judges who are ruling not on the rule of law, but on political lines?
I frankly don't know. I don't know. I mean, the corruption of the judiciary, I mean, this is always a very solid indicator of a country that's, this is what happens in Latin America. Yeah. Right? When the judiciary goes off the rails, that's a sign that country's in very serious trouble. So unless Donald Trump can get this back in order within the next few years, some people are highly pessimistic, say 2026, depending on the outcome of the midterms, or, people who are a little more optimistic by 2028, we're in real trouble.
There's one thing I want to go back to on January 6th, and I've seen it as a strike at the First Amendment. In other words, we're going to make it so threatening and ominous for people who participate in any sort of conservative rally, as evidenced by the witch hunt that was conducted, that we will never again be able to freely assemble as the Constitution, the Bill of Rights guarantees us. Do you see it the same way?
That was the point. And not just that. I mean, there was a very specific point, too. So we're going to keep people out of Washington, D.C. We're going to let everyone know that we're going to let the right know that Washington, D.C. is hostile territory for them. That if they come here, that they could get hurt. They could get hurt, they could get arrested, they could lose their freedom, they could lose their jobs, they could lose their lives. Right. So that was the point. It was specifically about Washington, D.C. More generally, yes, that's right. If you protest, if you say this or that, we'll take your money away from you. We'll put you in prison. We'll do whatever. Yeah, that was the general point there.
What's Obama's role in all of this? Because certainly he's been active behind the scenes.
I've been writing. It's a little frustrating, frankly, for people now to be seeing the problems with Joe Biden. Oh, wait, so Joe Biden wasn't really there? I'm like, well, yeah, I've been writing for more than 5 years, certainly since the 2020 campaign, about how Joe Biden wasn't all there, right? And everyone recognized that. Right. It wasn't just media geniuses like you and me, Rob. It was normal people who were watching the campaign. They go like, okay, so Biden's out of it. Right. And everyone was disgusted. And so you see people now, and, we want to say, oh, yeah, it's Jake Tapper, and it's just these clowns on the left who are saying, I didn't know it. But all these people on the right who are also saying, how dare they? How dare they say this? Who was running the country? Okay, you said it 5 years ago. So now you're acting like you're surprised about this. It's a little cheap. Yeah, but obviously, it was Barack Obama. I've been writing about this again for 5 years, and that's one of the big themes in disappearing the president, that it's Barack Obama who was running the show. And it's not like Barack Obama hid it or wanted to hide it, because Barack Obama likes taking credit for what he's doing. It was so obvious, like, okay, so Joe Biden's not there. Who's running the show? I guess maybe it has something to do with all the former Obama officials who are peopling the Biden administration in key roles. Right. Could that be it? Yes, of course that was going on. And it just, it betrays kind of the weakness of right-wing or conservative media or conservative thought. It's like, this is obviously what was going on. So now we're going to pretend that we didn't see it at the time, or maybe people didn't see it. And that's even worse. It's like, whoa, how surprising. It was Obama. But I talked to people at the time, including current and former past political officials, and they saw what was going on. But just for a number of reasons, they thought it was bad form to call out Barack Obama. So that's where we are. People decided not to call out Barack Obama. So now we're in a period of confusion where people are like, oh no, what happened the last 4 years? It wasn't Biden. It was someone else. Who was it? Anita Dunn. These are all Biden advisors. For Pete's sake, the 44th president of the United States decided to stay in Washington and lived a mile from the White House. What do people think was going on here? It's a little weak that's where our right-wing intelligentsia is, right?
The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast continues with our guest Lee Smith in just a moment.
Schilling Show Unleashed.
ShillingShowMedia.com is your one-stop shop for websites, audio and video production, and photography.
ShillingShowMedia.com will take your project from conception to completion.
ShillingShowMedia.com is reasonably priced and highly professional.
Need a website for your business? Visit ShillingShowMedia.com.
Need a video created or edited? Visit ShillingShowMedia.com.
Have a photography or graphic design project? Visit ShillingShowMedia.com.
ShillingShowMedia.com is your one-stop shop for websites, audio and video production, and photography.
Visit ShillingShowMedia.com. That's ShillingShowMedia.com.
Schilling Show Unleashed.
We continue now on the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Lee Smith, his new book is Disappearing the President, Trump, Truth Social, and the fight for the republic. I want to go to the FBI because for generations, people trusted the FBI. They probably shouldn't have, but they did, as an American institution that was infallible. And then all of a sudden, we find out all of these bad things the FBI was doing to Trump. So what happened there, and how did we miss it for so long?
It didn't really come to people's attention what had gone wrong. And, the FBI, I mean, all these places in Washington, I mean, they're bureaucratic agencies, which means they know how to fight inside the bureaucracy. And, of course, they also leak to the press, so they know how to get the press on their side. Look, I mean, the FBI had problems for a long time. They had problems under Hoover, of course. But one of the worst things that you might say that happened with the FBI was 9/11. And what happened? Instead of the FBI taking a hit for that, they got more power, right? Robert Mueller was the new director of the FBI at the time. Instead, he got more power. He got more money, more men, more resources. And that's the way that Washington works. Instead of people being held accountable for failure, they're given more power. It just happens all the time. And look, they started adding redundant intelligence services, the Department of Homeland Security. Well, why do we need DHS? We didn't need DHS. They added the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Why did we need that? We didn't need that. Well, what they've done is they've covered up all of these people's mistakes with phony reforms. So, yeah, the FBI has been in a not great place for a while, and that's not to say that there aren't terrific people there doing good, important work, but not as much as we'd like to think, or not as much as we hoped.
One of the very disturbing elements among many of this time is the normalization of political violence, and even overnight, watching the two Israeli consulate workers being murdered in Washington, D.C., and then seeing people popping up and defending this. What brought this about that people in America, at least a substantial number, believe this was okay?
Because the left believes that this is okay. That's why. I mean, it's that simple. The left has always legitimized political violence, and they always will. That's just what the left is. And we had a leftist president in Barack Obama, and then we had a even further left administration, nominally under Joe Biden, but again run by Barack Obama. Look at the different things that they legitimized. I mean, the post October 7th political violence on college campuses and in cities across the country. I mean, these are all blue cities. They could have shut these animals down anytime they wanted to. Why did they choose to let them go? Because that's an important part of their base, right? And they use this base as BLM, Antifa. These are the people who set fire to America in 2020. And that's how they helped mobilize the base, and that's how they helped hurt Donald Trump. So political violence is very important to the international left, and that includes, unfortunately, the American left.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember many decades ago seeing the Antifa protests in other countries around the world when the UN would get together, or some of the other groups, internationalist groups, and they'd have Antifa out in front across Europe. But I was thinking, boy, they're not here. We're sure lucky. Did they rise up here, or were they operational in the background for quite a while just before they were visible?
Someone who's written about that a lot is a man named Kyle Schiedler. And Kyle, I think he uses that name on Twitter. It's Shidler, and he has very good information on radical left wing movements. I mean, there's been leftist. This is actually why the FBI was started. To fight communist subversion and to fight far left violence. It's been going on for quite a while. No, I don't. I mean, maybe some of the networks with ties to Europe are new, but no. Again, I mean, this is who the left is, dating back to at least the French Revolution. Yeah. If we could trace the left back further, we'd find the violence there too. It's the same thing everywhere you find the left. They justify their violence. They justify their violence on political grounds, right? The whole thing is, well, the ends justify the means, and what are the ends? Oh, it's so beautiful, such a lovely utopia, such a wonderful world. We must eradicate all violence. We must eradicate war, racism, and so what if we have to kill a whole bunch of people to get there? And of course, those aren't really their goals. This is what they say their goals are. They're interested in power, and they're interested in violence. People who love political violence, that's why they're in it, for the political violence. It's not a justification. They're doing it for reasons of violence.
How does this play with the American public? I mean, it was certainly repudiated for generations in this country. Are we at a tipping point?
No, I think most of the American public, like there were freaks like, what's her name? Taylor Lorenz, who has a crush on Luigi, what's his last name? Maloney. Yeah, Mangione. Right. So, there are freaks on the left who love it. Most Americans hate it and they're scared by it, which are the two appropriate responses. And, God willing, law enforcement, local, federal, state authorities will all come down very hard on people. And I hope they come down very hard. And this guy was Elias something, the Chicago guy who gunned down the two Israeli diplomats. Law authorities come down very hard on them.
Yeah, I was hoping in along those lines that the federal government would get involved and seek the death penalty for him, to send a message to these people that you can't get away with it. Do you see this as something as practical, and would that really make a difference if we started executing people who are involved in this sort of political violence and murders?
Penalty in Washington, D.C. I'm pretty sure there's not. And I can't see any Washington, D.C. Jury convicting someone on knowing that the death penalty is a possibility. If it were a possibility in the D.C. courtroom, I think a D.C. jury would be unlikely to convict. No, they're not going to be able to execute him.
One of the most troubling events of all of this time period that we're talking about is the Mar-a-Lago raid. In other words, if they could go after who was presumably the most powerful man in the world and basically put him on his knees and enter his home and take things from him, we're all at risk. Was there ever any rectification of that, or is that something that they're just going to use again and again when Trump's out of power?
I think that's something we'd like to see, FBI Director Kash Patel get to the bottom of, find out exactly what went on at Mar-a-Lago, who is responsible, and then hold those people accountable for what they did. Again, as I say, Rob, President Trump has a very short tenure here, and there's a lot of things that have to get done because, again, if it's not, we're going to be in a very bad place in a couple of years' time.
Lee Smith, finally, Trump 2.0, where do we go from here? You mentioned that his tenure is short. Is there anybody who could pick up the reins and continue this sort of transformation?
The American public, make America great again, as Donald Trump says, it's a movement. Yeah. It's not a person. So the movement will, people who love their country, that should be normal. And unfortunately, it's not. The people who love America, this is the majority of the country. Will we have leadership worthy of our love and of our patriotism? That remains to be seen. I certainly hope so. There are a lot of talented people in the Trump administration. Are they worthy of America's love and support? We'll see. I certainly hope so. But again, all I know is that the left that we've been talking about here during the course of the show, they're not going away. I try to remind people again and again, Kamala Harris, as bad as she was as a candidate, maybe the worst, as Donald Trump would say, maybe the worst, she still got 70 million votes. And Rob, I believe that the 2020 election was fraudulent, right? Call me a conspiracy theorist, whatever. So I'm willing to accept there might have been millions of fake ballots pushed in for Kamala Harris in 24. Nonetheless, that's still going to be 60 to 65 million votes for a terrible candidate, right? Terrible. So what does that mean for 2028?
It's a frightening question, and I guess we will see where the country goes. Lee Smith, if people want to get a copy of your book, Disappearing the President, or if they want to follow you on social media, where are the best ways?
Well, there's Truth Social. We're Truth Social. I'm at Lee Smith. Twitter at Lee Smith DC. And the book, I hope they will get it. You can order it directly from the publisher and Counter Books. You can also still find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And I know it's still in a lot of great bookstores as well. I hope they will like it. Disappearing the President, Trump, Truth Social, and the Fight for the Republic.
You've done a fantastic job in laying this out for people. Lee Smith, thank you so much for joining us today on the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast.
Thank you so much, Rob, again, for inviting me on to speak with you. I really enjoyed it.
That concludes another edition of the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Visit us online at schillingshow.com, where you can directly support this podcast by clicking on the Patreon banner at the top of the page and making a monthly donation. Your support is essential for the continuation of the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Until next time.